I am creating this warning to protect everyone I can from a secret society. As such, I choose to remain anonymous for the sake of my own safety and the safety of my family. There is no need for you to follow this account or even like this content. Chances are if I make a follow-up video it will be from another anonymous account. In any case, I will share everything I know about this group here in the hopes that more people will have the courage to come forward. It was 2 years ago when my friend Tegan asked me to go with her to a local craft fair. It was an outdoor event with an overcast sky and an occasional drizzle of rain. The weather was unseasonably bitter for early fall and we spent the day shuffling from one vendor's tent to another trying to stay warm. Eventually we found our way to an old woman doing free tarot readings. I never put much stock into astrology, psychics or things like that, but there wasn't much else to do and it didn't cost anything. The old woman dealt a series of cards and consulted the little folded booklet that came with the deck to describe what each card meant. While I sat there for my reading, I noticed Tegan speaking with a man in the booth I didn't notice before. He looked like he was in his late 20s and was dressed in a Gothic style. Several tattoos ran up and down the visible part of his arm, and on his neck was a snake eating its own tail encircling a gem. I would later find out it was called an Ouroboros. When my reading was over, the man was gone. I asked Tegan what their conversation was about and she said it was just small talk and that he was just passing through. I don't remember too much else about that day, except at some point Tegan asked me if I had ever heard of something called the Black Jade Society. Months went by and Tegan and I both went back to our separate colleges. We still texted here and there several times a week like always. At some point I noticed that Tegan's interests had taken a weird turn. She began asking me questions about paranormal topics and stuff like that. Things we used to make fun of others for believing in. Tegan told me that she joined an online social club called the Black Jade Society. I instantly remembered the name and had an uneasy feeling about it. She told me that she was meeting up with other members of the group for parties and other gatherings. She suggested that I should join if I would promise to keep an open mind. Well, I joined the Facebook group just out of curiosity. Rather than participate, I preferred to lurk on all the public posts. This is the point I realized something really dark was going on. Black Jade Society is not merely a social club. It is openly an occult social club. Witchcraft and magic rituals are discussed very frequently. Despite being raised in a very conservative Christian community, that kind of stuff never bothered me. Things like magic, demons, ghosts were all just make-believe. So I thought, on the surface, Black Jade Society appears to be just like any other occult group on the internet. Several posts speak of manifesting and chaos magic. Things you would normally expect to see in such a place. The public face of the group is actually quite tame. However, I would soon learn just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Black Jade had a few public events last year, but what is not talked about publicly is the private events. These events are an absolute secret reserved for what is known as the inner circle, which my poor Tegan was recruited into. How did I find out about this? About 2 months ago Tegan came over to celebrate my recent engagement. We hadn't been texting as much as we used to. She was always so abrupt and taking longer to respond. My fiancé and I took her out to our favorite Italian place. About midway into the meal, Tegan excused herself and went to the restroom. When she turned I could see the top of an Ouroboros tattoo peeking above the back of her top. Back at my apartment when she and I were alone I cornered her. We ended up getting into a heated argument and she tried to storm out the door. I held her car keys tightly in my hands and crumbled into a ball begging her to tell me what was going on. I felt like I was losing my best friend to a cult. In that moment she told me everything. The Black Jade Society is actually a secret society operating in plain sight. We spent all night discussing forbidden knowledge that she was now privy to, and then she made me swear to secrecy. The next afternoon I was getting gas at the local minimart when a car pulled up next to me. It was the guy the first had seen talking to Tegan at the craft fair. His hair was now dyed bright purple instead of jet black. The man said his name was Lane and he was aware that Tegan and I had a lengthy discussion the night before. He handed me a scrap of paper with an address that also included a time and date. He wanted me to join him and some friends for a small gathering to get to know me a little better. I told him no thanks and crumbled up the paper before tossing it into the wind. Lane just sat there smiling. When I asked him what was so funny, he laughed and said that he was just thinking how funny it would be if the traffic lights on the corner were to suddenly turn green at the same time. About 30 seconds later I watched in horror as 3 cars collided in the intersection. Afterwards, he drove off. A few days later I received an anonymous text message with the mysterious address, date and time. All this I kept secret from my fiancé. I searched everywhere online for anything having to do with Black Jade Society. Most of the time my research led me nowhere. There was always a hint here or there dealing with an occult group of that name, but nothing substantial. Nothing exists like the mountain of content relating to the Illuminati or Freemasons. Finally, I found something solid. Using the public domain websites I located 2 works mentioning this cult. The first was a book from the 1800s speaking of the ancient mystery religions. A group known as the Black Jadites was written about by the ancient Egyptians as well as Greek historians. Strangely, they also adopted the Ouroboros icon as their own. The second book is of unknown date which was compiled in the last century. Strangely, I found the listing for this book on a cached page of an auction site that wasn't eBay. It looks like it was printed backwards and has some strange number pattern on the cover. I wanted to message the original seller but the profile no longer exists. Within hours after making these little discoveries my computer hard drive failed. It was a fairly new machine so it shouldn't have happened. Luckily, I was able to take screenshots and get them off the device before they were gone for good. A week later there was a terrible thunderstorm. We were out of town on a business trip for my company. My fiancé was sick on the couch of our hotel room. I volunteered to go out and bring back some soup. I was unfamiliar with the area and it was late on a Sunday night. Most places were closed or closing. Eventually I saw a tavern on the side of the road and decided to give it a try. The lights were on but no bartender was behind the bar and no hostess was at the stand. I was about to leave when I heard voices in the room beyond. I ventured down the open hall and immediately saw a small group sitting around a table. I nearly fell to the floor. Lane was there as well as Tegan. They were speaking to me but I couldn't hear their words. The room was spinning. I yanked out my phone. The same address, same date and same time. How could this be? In a state of panic I fled to the door. I dug my fingers around the handle when I heard someone approach behind me. If you leave now you will never be in our reality again. Lane said. I thought I might have a heart attack. Somehow I managed to get back in the car and sped all the way back to the hotel. I don't remember getting back to my room that night. The next morning I woke up alone. My fiancé was missing. Checkout came and went and I remained alone. All my calls went to voicemail and my texts were ignored. Eventually I drove home and found only my belongings in the apartment. I didn't know what else to do so I went to the police station to file a missing persons report. I told them all about the Black Jade Society and what happened at the tavern. The hotel turned over their surveillance footage which showed that I arrived at the hotel alone. The tavern used to be a well-known establishment but had been vacant and abandoned for years. Nobody remembers that I was engaged and my family does not remember me having a childhood friend named Tegan.